The first rumor began in the most ordinary way possible, through a thin dormitory wall and a conversation that was never meant to be scientific data. The alien girl had been studying quietly at her desk, three of her delicate fingers scrolling through a digital anatomy chart while the other two held a stylus for note-taking. Her dorm room on the Interstellar University station was silent except for the low hum of station gravity generators and the occasional chatter of students passing through the hallway. Normally, she ignored those sounds. But that night a particular conversation reached her ears. Human voices. They were laughing. "I'm telling you, man, 3 times," one of them said proudly. Another human snorted. 3? Amateur. "Last semester I dated someone from the Marine Academy. We didn't sleep until morning." More laughter followed. The alien girl's stylus stopped moving. Her large luminous eyes slowly lifted from her screen. She waited, listening carefully. "Seriously," another human said. "You just need stamina." Her head tilted sharply. Stamina? For what? She quietly stood and walked closer to the wall separating her room from the neighboring dorm unit. Human voices were notoriously loud, but fortunately their language had already been translated into the station's universal academic dialect. "Multiple rounds," someone said. "Worth it though." "Absolutely." There was more laughter. The alien girl blinked. Her mind immediately began categorizing the information. Multiple rounds. Stamina. No sleep. Her eyes narrowed. That could only mean one thing. Mating. She slowly stepped back from the wall, her expression shifting from curiosity to complete disbelief. "That is biologically impossible," she whispered to herself. She returned to her desk and opened her xenobiology database. Thousands of species were cataloged within the Galactic Biological Archives, including humans, who had only joined the Interstellar Academic Network a few decades earlier. Their physiology had already fascinated researchers across several departments. Humans could run for extraordinary distances. They had unusual pain tolerance. Their emotional bonding patterns were complex and sometimes illogical. But the rumors she had just overheard violated basic biological principles. She began reviewing the reproductive cycles of known species. Most intelligent organisms required a recovery period after mating. Sometimes several hours. Often several days. For some species it required weeks of metabolic stabilization before another cycle could occur safely. She scrolled further down the data screen. Human reproductive physiology. The file contained only preliminary research. Limited observations. Several notes about hormonal bonding and pair relationships. But there was no confirmation of the absurd claim she had just overheard. Her eyes scanned the document again. Nothing. Her fingers tapped slowly on the desk. "If humans could perform repeated mating cycles within a short time frame," she muttered, "their reproductive organs would suffer catastrophic biological strain." Her stylus began tapping faster. Structural fatigue, muscular exhaustion, potential tissue failure. She stopped writing and leaned back in her chair. There is no way their tool could survive that. Her gaze drifted toward the dorm hallway. The humans had stopped talking, but the seed of curiosity had already taken root. She opened a new research document. Her academic instincts were impossible to suppress. The title appeared across the screen. Human Reproductive Endurance. Verification Study. She hesitated for a moment. Then she added the first research note. Observation 1. Human males claim ability to perform multiple mating cycles without biological damage. Claim appears scientifically improbable. She leaned back again, considering the possibilities. Humans were strange. Everyone at the university knew that. They were persistence hunters from a high-gravity world. Their bodies were built for endurance. Perhaps their reproductive biology had evolved unusual resilience as well. But extraordinary claims required evidence. Her gaze slowly shifted toward the other half of the dorm suite. Her roommate, a human. Specifically, a human engineering student who had been assigned to share the dorm unit during the interspecies housing program. He was currently in the common room, probably working on one of his mechanical projects or watching human entertainment videos. She had only known him for 2 months. He was friendly, relaxed, often sarcastic, and completely unaware that he might be the most important biological research subject she had ever encountered. Her eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. A controlled observation environment, she whispered. She opened a fresh page in the research document. Subject identification. Human roommate. She paused briefly, then continued writing. Subject H1. Her stylus moved rapidly now. Subject appears physically healthy. No visible reproductive injury. Behavioral patterns relaxed and confident. She stopped and looked at the wall again, remembering the conversation she had overheard. 3 times. No sleep. Her tail flicked slightly in disbelief. That cannot be correct. But there was only one way to verify the truth. Science demanded observation, careful measurement, accurate documentation. She opened a small digital notebook and began organizing a monitoring schedule. Sleep patterns, dietary intake, exercise levels, general stamina. If the human species truly possessed such extraordinary reproductive endurance, the biological signs would appear somewhere in their physiology. She saved the document and stood from her desk. In the living room, she could hear her roommate humming quietly while adjusting something metallic on the table. She stepped into the doorway and observed him silently for several seconds. The human looked perfectly normal. Average height, dark hair, focused expression. He glanced up when he noticed her staring. "Oh, hey," he said casually. "Didn't see you there." She studied him carefully. He had no idea that his species might have just broken several known laws of xenobiology. Interesting. Very interesting. She returned to her room without saying anything. Her stylus tapped against the notebook again. New entry. Observation 2. Subject remains unaware of ongoing study. She paused, then added another note. Subject still alive. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. After a moment, she added the final line. Tool integrity, currently unknown. The next morning, the alien girl woke earlier than usual. Not because she needed rest, because her experiment had officially begun. Her eyes opened slowly, while the artificial morning lights of the station brightened the dorm room. For a moment she lay still, reviewing the plan she had carefully designed the night before. The research document had grown to 12 pages already, filled with hypotheses about human endurance, metabolic recovery, and the structural resilience of human reproductive anatomy. Most of those hypotheses still ended with the same conclusion. Impossible. But scientific truth was not determined by assumption. It required observation. Careful, consistent observation. She quietly sat up and opened her digital notebook. New entry. Observation Day 1. Subject H1 currently sleeping. Breathing steady. No visible signs of biological exhaustion. She paused, then added another line. Tool status, still unknown. Satisfied, she climbed out of bed and walked toward the shared dorm kitchen. The human was already there. He stood at the counter wearing loose sleep clothes while pouring something dark into a cup. Steam drifted into the air. Coffee. A strange human stimulant that smelled both bitter and oddly comforting. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled casually. Morning. She froze for a second, then slowly nodded. Morning. Her eyes carefully examined him from head to toe. Healthy posture. Stable balance. No visible injuries. The human took a sip of coffee and noticed her staring again. Why are you looking at me like a doctor about to deliver bad news? She tilted her head. I am observing. Observing what? She tapped her stylus against the notebook. You. The human blinked. Okay, that's mildly concerning. She stepped closer and studied his face. You appear well rested. Thanks. I think. Your biological systems appear stable. Pretty sure that's how mornings work. She wrote something quickly. The human leaned sideways, trying to peek at the screen. Are you writing about me? Yes. Why? She answered immediately, as if the explanation were obvious. I am conducting a xenobiological verification study. The human lowered his coffee slowly. I'm sorry, what? She turned the notebook so she could read her own notes more clearly. Human reproductive endurance claims require verification. The human stared at her. Silence filled the kitchen. Finally, he said, very carefully, I feel like I missed several important steps in this conversation. She continued writing. Subject displays mild confusion when confronted with scientific observation. Hold on, he said quickly. Stop writing. She paused. What? What do you mean reproductive endurance? Her eyes lifted calmly. Last night I overheard human students discussing mating frequency. The human immediately choked on his coffee. You what? She nodded seriously. They claimed humans can mate multiple times in a single rest cycle. He coughed violently. That's not something you're supposed to overhear. She looked puzzled, but it was spoken loudly. That's not the point. She studied him again. You appear embarrassed. Yeah, obviously. She wrote another note. Subject demonstrates emotional discomfort when topic introduced. The human ran both hands through his hair. Oh my God. She continued calmly. Based on galactic biological data, such behavior would normally cause severe anatomical stress. He stared at her in disbelief. So you're studying that? Yes. With me? Yes. Without asking? Yes. The human closed his eyes. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he sighed heavily. You know what? I'm almost afraid to ask. She looked genuinely curious. Ask what? What exactly your research involves? Her eyes brightened slightly. Finally, a useful question. She began explaining with complete academic seriousness. I will observe dietary intake, energy levels, sleep cycles, and physical stamina. The human slowly leaned against the counter. And how does that prove anything? She flipped the page of her notebook. Human endurance is strongly connected to overall metabolic health. He rubbed his face. Right. If humans truly possess this reproductive resilience, supporting physiological patterns must exist. He stared at her for a long moment. You realize those guys were probably exaggerating, right? She blinked. Why would they exaggerate? Because they're human. She frowned thoughtfully. Your species often spreads inaccurate biological information? All the time. She wrote another note. Possible cultural exaggeration behavior. The human groaned. Oh, good. Now it's in the official report. She ignored the sarcasm and continued observing him carefully. How many hours did you sleep last night? 7. She wrote it down. Dietary intake. Coffee. Previous meal? Pizza. She paused. What is pizza? Complicated. She nodded and wrote again. Subject consumes high-energy processed nutrition. The human pointed at the notebook. I'm starting to feel like a lab rat. You are a research participant. I didn't volunteer. You did not refuse. I didn't know. She considered that. Fair point. The human sighed again. So what happens now? She flipped another page. I continue observing. And what exactly are you hoping to prove? She answered without hesitation. That your species cannot safely perform repeated mating cycles. He stared at her. You think we'd break? Yes. He suddenly burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle. A full laugh that forced him to set his coffee down. She watched him carefully. Why are you laughing? You're studying the wrong thing. She tilted her head. Explain. He leaned against the counter again. Humans don't think about it like biology. Then how do you think about it? Relationships. She frowned slightly. Clarify. He shrugged. Most humans don't just schedule mating cycles like mechanical maintenance. Her stylus paused. Then why would the activity repeat? He smirked. Because they like each other. She blinked. That answer had not appeared anywhere in the xenobiology database. Her stylus moved again. New observation. The human groaned softly. Oh no. She finished writing the line. Subject still alive. He sighed. Comforting. She added another sentence beneath it. Tools still functional. The human covered his face with both hands. This is going to be the most embarrassing semester of my life. For the next 3 days, the alien girl continued her research with the calm determination of someone who believed she was on the verge of an important scientific discovery. Unfortunately for the human, the experiment was no longer confined to their dorm room. The problem began with a simple mistake. She had intended to store her research notes inside a private academic folder used only for personal projects. Instead, while organizing her data files late at night, She accidentally synchronized the document with the Xenobiology department's shared student research network. She did not notice, but someone else did. It started quietly. A second-year amphibious student browsing the network saw the title first. Human Reproductive Endurance, Verification Study. Naturally, curiosity won. Within 20 minutes, the document had been opened by 12 students. Within an hour, it had spread across 3 academic departments. And by the next morning, nearly everyone on the residential side of the university station had heard about it. The human had no idea any of this was happening. He walked through the station cafeteria carrying a tray of breakfast and noticed something strange immediately. People were staring at him. Not just looking. Staring. A tall insectoid student turned its head to follow him across the room. 2 feathered avians whispered to each other while glancing in his direction. Even a group of humans sitting near the window began grinning the moment they saw him.
He slowed down.
Okay, he muttered to himself. Something weird is going on. He sat down at his usual table. 30 seconds later, one of the human students from the engineering department rushed over and dropped into the chair across from him. Dude. What? Are you okay with your dorm roommate publishing research about your sex life? The human froze. My what? The other student pulled out a tablet and spun it around so he could see the screen. At the top of the document was the title, Human Reproductive Endurance, Verification Study. The human stared at it. Then he scrolled down. His own face appeared in a small observation photo attached to the report. Subject H1. His brain stopped functioning for several seconds. I'm going to die, he whispered. The other student laughed. Relax. It's hilarious. It's not hilarious. He scrolled further down. Observation 3. Subject consumes excessive caffeine, but shows no metabolic fatigue. Observation 4. Subject displays typical human social confidence. Observation 5. Tool integrity remains stable. The human dropped the tablet on the table and covered his face. Oh my God. Meanwhile, across campus, the alien girl walked calmly into the xenobiology laboratory. She noticed the silence immediately. Several students were gathered around a holographic display. Their heads turned slowly toward her the moment she entered the room. One of them raised a claw. Are you the one studying the human? She blinked. Yes. The room exploded with questions. Is it true humans can mate multiple times in a single rest cycle? Did you measure recovery intervals? Are their organs reinforced somehow? She stared at them in confusion. How do you know about my study? Another student lifted a tablet. Your paper is trending on the department network. Her eyes widened. Trending. She rushed forward and looked at the screen. Her entire research log was visible. Every observation. Every note. Including the lines she had written late at night while trying to understand human behavior. Subject still alive. Tools still functional. Astonishing. The alien girl felt a strange sensation she rarely experienced. Embarrassment. Her tail curled slightly as the students continued asking questions. So, what have you learned so far? Are humans biologically unique? Can we interview the subject? She raised her hands quickly. This study is still preliminary, but your observations suggest the rumors might be true. She hesitated. Possibly. Across the cafeteria, the human was still recovering from the discovery. 2 more engineering students had joined the table. One of them was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. You're famous. I don't want to be famous. Too late. Another student leaned forward. So, purely for academic reasons, is the research accurate? The human glared at him. Shut up. By the afternoon, the situation had escalated even further. Students from other species began approaching him with questions that ranged from curious to deeply uncomfortable. One reptilian anthropology student asked if human skeletal structures were reinforced during mating cycles. A gelatinous life form wanted to know if humans secreted protective hormones. Someone else asked if human endurance was connected to their history as persistence hunters. The human escaped the campus courtyard and hurried back to the dorm complex. When he entered the suite, the alien girl was sitting at the table reviewing her notes. She looked up immediately. Oh, good. You returned safely. He stared at her. Returned safely? She nodded.
Yes.
I was concerned a sudden attention might cause social stress. He pointed at her notebook. You uploaded the study. Her eyes widened again. I did not intentionally upload anything. He collapsed into the chair across from her. Well, it's everywhere now. She processed this information quietly. That explains the questions. He leaned back and sighed. You basically turned me into a walking biology exhibit. She looked genuinely thoughtful. That was not my goal. What was your goal? Scientific clarity. He laughed tiredly. You definitely got attention. She glanced down at the notebook again, then slowly added a new entry. Observation 12. Human subject experiencing significant social embarrassment due to research visibility. He watched her write. You're still taking notes? Yes. About me? Yes. He groaned and leaned forward, resting his head on the table. You know what the worst part is? What? Everyone thinks I'm some kind of endurance champion now. She blinked. That would support the original hypothesis. That's not helping. For a moment she simply observed him. Then she asked quietly, why does this bother you? He lifted his head slightly. Because humans don't like being studied like animals. She considered that carefully. Her stylus stopped moving. Even if the study is important. Especially then. Silence filled the room for a few seconds. Then she closed the notebook. I did not intend to cause distress. He looked up. For the first time since the experiment started, she seemed uncertain. Her voice was quieter. I only wanted to understand your species. He sat up slowly. Well, next time, maybe ask before starting a research project about someone's private biology. She nodded slowly. That is a reasonable suggestion. Another quiet moment passed. Then she spoke again. There is one variable I still do not understand. He sighed. Of course there is. You said earlier that humans repeat mating activities because they like each other. Yeah. She looked directly at him. But if that is true, why do I feel uncomfortable imagining you doing it with someone else? The human blinked. Wait. Her eyes narrowed slightly in confusion. This reaction appears illogical. He stared at her for several seconds. Then he slowly leaned back in the chair. Well, he said carefully, that might actually explain a lot. The dorm room remained unusually quiet after her question. The human leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if the answer might be written somewhere in the metal panels above them. For someone who normally had a sarcastic comment ready within seconds, he was taking an unusually long time to respond. Across the table, the alien girl watched him carefully. Her notebook remained closed now, resting beside her hand. For the first time since the experiment began, she had stopped writing. That might explain a lot, he had said earlier. Now she waited. What does it explain? She finally asked. He rubbed the back of his neck and let out a slow breath. Well, in human terms, that reaction usually means one thing. Her eyes focused immediately. What thing? He hesitated again, clearly choosing his words carefully. You might like me. The alien girl blinked. Once. Twice. That conclusion is statistically unsupported. He laughed softly. See? That's the difference between human logic and science logic. She leaned slightly forward. Clarify. In science, you want evidence first, he said. Humans sometimes feel things first and only understand them later. Her expression remained puzzled. She slowly picked up the notebook again, but didn't open it. So this feeling, what does it indicate? He shrugged. Usually attraction. Her tail flicked once in confusion. That does not make sense. My interest began with curiosity about your species. Yeah. And my observations were purely scientific. Sure. And yet, she continued slowly, the idea of another female interacting with you produces emotional discomfort. Exactly. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she finally opened the notebook again. He groaned immediately. Oh, come on. She ignored him and wrote a new entry. Observation 13. Researcher experiencing unexpected emotional response related to subject. He leaned forward. You're writing about yourself now? Yes. That's new. She finished the line and paused again. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then she closed the notebook once more. This creates a complication. How so? If my emotional responses influence the research, the results may become biased. Trust me, he said, smiling slightly. That study was already biased. She tilted her head.
How?
You started it assuming humans would break.
She thought about that.
Yes. And now? She hesitated. Now I am less certain. He laughed quietly. That's progress. She looked down at the table. There is another problem. Let me guess, he said. The whole university thinks I'm some kind of endurance legend now. That is also a problem.
He sighed.
Great. But the larger issue, she continued, is that I no longer view you only as a research subject. He raised an eyebrow. Oh. She nodded slowly. At first you were simply a convenient biological example. That's comforting. But now, she paused. Now I find myself enjoying our conversations. He smiled slightly. That's called friendship. She shook her head.
No.
It feels different. His smile faded just a little.
Oh.
Silence filled the room again. Outside the dorm window, distant ships drifted slowly past the station's observation ring. The alien girl finally spoke again. In human culture, how do individuals confirm attraction? He chuckled softly. Well, usually not with research papers. That method seemed efficient.
It was terrifying.
She looked slightly embarrassed again. That was not my intention. He leaned forward with his arms resting on the table. You know something? What? I think your experiment accidentally proved something. Her eyes brightened. What? That humans aren't the only weird species here. She tilted her head. Explain. You try to understand relationships like they were engineering equations. That seemed logical. Except relationships aren't logical. She frowned thoughtfully. Then how do humans manage them? He smiled. Mostly by guessing. That seems inefficient. Extremely. For a moment, she seemed to consider returning to the notebook again. Then she stopped herself. Perhaps a different type of experiment is required. He squinted slightly. What kind of experiment? One that tests emotional compatibility rather than biological endurance. He stared at her. Are you asking me out? She blinked again. That is the human phrase for it, yes. He leaned back and laughed quietly. You know the entire xenobiology department might explode if they hear about that. She shrugged lightly. Scientific breakthroughs often cause strong reactions. True. She watched him carefully.
Well?
Well, what? Do humans normally require extended processing time before agreeing to a mating experiment? He nearly choked. Dating experiment, he corrected. Clarification accepted. He rubbed his face again, still smiling. You realize if we start dating, your research paper is going to become legendary. That is acceptable. He studied her expression. She seemed completely serious and strangely hopeful. Finally, he shrugged. All right. Her eyes widened slightly. All right?
Yeah, he said.
Let's try the non-scientific approach. She sat a little straighter. Then I will update the research conclusion. He laughed. Of course you will. She opened the notebook one last time and began writing carefully. Final observation. Human endurance appears impressive. She paused, glancing at him briefly before continuing. However, emotional bonding behaviors are far more complex than expected. He leaned sideways to read it. That's your big conclusion? Not yet. She added another line. Researcher recommends further long-term study.
He smirked.
With me? Yes. She finished the entry and slowly closed the notebook. Then she added one final sentence beneath the others. Observation update. Subject still alive. He laughed again. She finished writing. Tools still functional. He shook his head. I'm never living that down, am I? She looked up at him with what might have been the alien version of a smile. Unlikely. Then she added the final note. Researcher possibly in love.